Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, along with my co-host.
Good morning. I'm Bonnie Snyder.
I see you have your new T-shirt on.
I do. I do. I love it.
Yay.
Yes, I love it.
Hopefully we'll... Actually, we do have more in the foundation office, so that's good. We want to first thank WeBeam TV for allowing us to be here today. And if you want to help support our show, please, again, Greg Schindler State Farm Office. If you're looking for insurance, you just need to get a quote. They'll donate some money to the foundation. They really want to raise enough money to pay for one show. I actually just got new auto insurance from them.
Nice.
Saved me some money and better insurance. So that was good. Still working on the homeowners. But also Kindest, we partnered with them, and you can go to that webpage, and there's a whole slew of donation levels from $5 to $25,000 to whatever amount you want to would like to donate to us. That'll help keep us going, help keep studio going, and us bringing hopefully some good information.
Absolutely.
So today we we went through that book, The Wilderness of Grief, of Suicide Grief, and which is a really awesome book. And now we decided to go through another one, which is a really good book because it has exercises in the book, and it is Progressing Through Grief, Guided Exercises to Understand Your Emotions and Recover from Loss. The author is Stephanie Jose. The book can be purchased on Amazon, and if you go to smile.amazon.com and choose the Bobby White Foundation as your charity of choice, a small portion of your purchase will be donated to the foundation also. In just the first chapter, did you notice some of the parallels?
I did. I noticed how she highlighted the stages of grief. Or not the stages. Well, she talked about the stages of grief. She also talked about the Bill of Rights. And as I'm reading, I am noticing the parallel between what Dr. Wolford said in his book to what Stephanie Jose was saying in her book in terms of here's the Law Survivor Bill of Rights. And I was like, when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness. And so, yeah, I think, this was a nice segue as we go from, providing synopses on, the literature, whether it's a book, or a website or a movie that we find, that talks about, this process.
And with this book, even though some of the things parallel with the suicide grief, this is a really good book for any kind of grief.
Exactly. I love the way she, in the one section of that first chapter where she talked about the majority of the times, the default to grief is always, we've lost somebody through a death. And how she said grief can be a result of anything. You lose your job, you lose your house through a foreclosure or a fire. So I really liked how she drew that parallel.
Well, and that's particularly important with what's been happening with everybody this past year.
Yes.
There's so many different things that have been unforeseen due to the pandemic. And so there's many different types of grief that so many people are having to deal with. And I think as we go through this book and go through the exercises, it's another part of healing. You can't it's not just going to be one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a plethora of things in order to help a person come out on the other side maybe a little bit better. a little bit healthier.
And I like how she started this chapter where she said grief is our reaction to a loss. It's our way that we heal. And, I think I find, people when they are, talking about grief, it is mostly focused on the loss. It's mostly focused on the, how do I get past this? And I don't think, I find sometimes that there's not a clear understanding that grief, is that healing process.
Right. Now, I want to read this little paragraph here at the beginning of this first part. It's understanding grief. Grief is our reaction to a loss. It's our way of healing. We need time to heal, but many of us ignore our personal needs in order to meet the demands of everyday life. We forget to take care of ourselves. Allowing your mind and body to heal after a loss is important, even critical. Just like you would not leave a broken leg without attention, you should not leave an emotional injury unattended. Taking time to stop and breathe, assess how the loss is affecting you, and figure out what you need to move forward will smooth this transition in your life. This paragraph kind of got to me in one way because also I broke my leg 3 months after Bobby died. I mean, it was a severe break. And I was like, oh boy, been there. But yeah, it's I think people, we don't look at grief in the proper light. It's something that we need to go through, and we need to go through to heal, instead of focusing on the loss per se.
Yeah, and she starts it off with one of the first key points that I found, that jumped out at me at the book was acknowledging what is like life right now, and acknowledging and understanding that there's no specific mold to grief. We've talked about this. This is what, our 20th episode?
Yes.
And, for the last 19 episodes, to include this one and ones that come after, is making sure that, there is an understanding that grief is, it's not like I'm going to bake a cake and it's going to be a round cake. And as long as I put the batter in a round mold, I'm going to get a round cake. Or, it's, a specific holiday, and as long as I put the cake in a mold for that specific holiday, the cake is going to come out in that mold. Grief doesn't work like that. And I think some people don't realize that, grief does not work like that.
Well, she says here too, grieving, and people need, this is really important. Grieving is not wasted time.
No.
It is time to use to connect with your thoughts and feelings to become complete again. And also not to feel pressure to get over your grief. But I think society and, some people, and this is a part where you need to really be careful of, is not to let that happen, that you're going to get pressured into, oh, well, it's been, this period of time, you need to get over it.
Right. Where she talks about also that grief is one of the hardest experiences that we go through, and sometimes it happens during inconvenient times. And when I read that, I'm like, she has a point. At the same time, through my own, journey through grief, and continued journey, I felt myself saying, all right, this was, what is a convenient time? Because I sit back and I think, for instance, Aiden's death, for example, I was at work in a classroom with about 35 sixth graders when I got the call from Carl. And, I remember, I was walking, and I shared the story. It was Valentine's Day. I remember walking into the building and, my phone ringing, and, I got this excitement. Oh, Carl's calling me to tell me Happy Valentine's Day. Nowhere in my brain did I conceptualize what that conversation, it's like when I got up that morning you do your morning routine, take your shower, brush your teeth, decide what clothes I'm going to wear. I knew what lesson that, I was going to, a discussion I was going to have with my students, to, you know, 5 minutes after I pulled into the parking lot on campus, and seeing my phone ringing and like, oh, it's Carl. He's calling to tell me Happy Valentine's Day. To, hearing, Aiden's going to want to talk to you. To 20 minutes later, hearing again those words that I did not want to hear. Mom, he's gone. Aiden is dead. And, being in the middle of my class, trying to get out the door, looking at my students, hang on a minute, this is important. I have to take this call. Looking at the, person who was in the classroom with me, I really need to take this. And not being able to get out the door before I heard those words. And, just, I do remember, just screaming, no. And, as I go back and I, relive, whether you want to call it relive or, process that day, I'm like, all right, grief happens at quote unquote inconvenient times. And I sit back and I think about this as like, well, I want to get that call at any time. I did not, nowhere in the grand scheme of things did I want to get a phone call that says, your grandson is gone. Fast forward, 6 months later, as, mind you, I'm just getting back from, celebrating, my 41st. Wow, and I've been in high school 41 years. Celebrating with, friends, celebrating our high school reunion, having a wonderful time, and not, now my brain will always process as pretty much as things were winding up at this celebration for my high school reunion. At that same time, my son was taking his last breaths. And I'm like, again, you're like, wow, that was really inconvenient for, his death to coincide with my reunion. I was like, and again, not that I was like, Pat, you could have picked a better time, and I think what happens with people is, recognizing that loss in any form, well, I shouldn't say in any form, let me retract that just a little bit. Oftentimes loss is not planned. Oftentimes it happens, when we least expect it. And I would say even if the loss is expected, I think of, let me use the example of, a cousin who, she was diagnosed with an aggressive breast cancer. And I remember the day before she passed away, I'm on the phone with her and, do you know what hospice is? And I'm like, yes. And, my connection with her is, she and a nephew and I were all diagnosed at the same time. But I was like, yes, I do. And, as I'm, ending the phone call with her, it was at one point, I said, well, let me let you get some rest. And no, she wanted to talk. And I didn't want to wear her out because I could tell that she was, not getting enough oxygen, but she wanted to talk, and I was like, it's fine. And, again, as I'm, getting off the phone, and I, said to her, I love you. So I love you, I love you too. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My brain didn't process. Tomorrow was not going to come, because, again, I'm on my way, to work, to, another group that I had to do, another group of participants. When my older sister called me to tell me she was gone. And I'm just like, and I remember calling my supervisor. I just got a call. My cousin's gone. And my supervisor, I love my supervisor, mind you. She was like, if you've got to cancel your groups, just cancel it. You're okay. And I just remember, no. I need to be at work. I need to do my groups. I need to, my participants, are expecting me to be there. I can't cancel right now. And, telling myself, all right, put myself in this mode. I'm grieving the loss of, and again, someone else who I love, and mind you, her death happened, before Aiden or Patrick. At the same time, not going into this mold where you're notified of a death. And that mold that some people would put you in is death happens, you're supposed to stop life right then and there. And, go cry, go grieve, go, like in this case, do I jump on a plane right now? And, she's in New Jersey. Do I jump on a plane right now and go to New Jersey? Do I, go home and don all black? Because again, that's the mold, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way.
No. Well, and it goes back, it kind of relates to what is normal, and she even says, and we've talked about this many times, there's no absolute normal.
No, there's not.
And she has in here, the definition of normal is a personal one and is constantly changing depending on the situation.
Yes. And, and I look at, where she also pointed out, in terms of what we do with grief, when she says some people are more comfortable avoiding grief. And, I think about in that, experience, that I shared with my cousin's death, when I'm like, no, I have to go to work. I need to do this. That particular statement in the book, had me pause for a minute and sit back and examine myself. Was I avoiding the grief by going to work? By like, no, she's gone. I get this. It was expected. She was on hospice. We knew that this was inevitable. Yet again, even though it was inevitable, it was bound to happen. It's not like, hospice looks at us and says, okay, so they're going on hospice, and at, 10:56 on April 22nd, that's when they're going to be gone. No. I mean,
No. Well, it's like my mom, for instance. My dad passed away 5 weeks before Bobby, and my mom was still working. She, how old was she? 74, and my dad was in the hospital for a month. He had fallen and cracked his back in a couple places, and at first we kind of thought that he was going to come out of there, but as time went on, it was like he wasn't. But Mom couldn't stay with him 24/7. Number one, it would have driven her crazy. And she worked. So she would work, and then she'd go back to the hospital. And when my dad passed away, she continued to work. But for her, that was her saving grace, was having a something to do and taking care of her customers. And then she was forced into retirement. Last year, the store closed. And she has a difficult time with that, even though she has a house full of people there. But, going to work was her way of dealing with her grief. And she's always said that whenever she has had going through difficult times, her saving grace was going to work.
And I found with that, work, because for me, same thing. My work, is how I ground myself a lot. However, if I go through and I look at, different losses that I've had in my life and how those individual losses affected, and I don't want to say my ability to work, because it wasn't, I don't feel it was an issue of ability, inability, more than it was, choice. And even then it's like, well, wait a minute, now, was it really choice or was it ability? And I like to think that it was more of a choice thing. Because I think of, when, like when my father passed away, I shouldn't say stepfather. I mean, he was my dad from birth on. But when my father passed away, I remember working up until the day, I think I drove to Jersey for that one, that I, got in the car to drive. And then the day I, like got back on one day, the next day I was back to work. With my cousin, same thing. I, worked up until, the day I was supposed to get on a plane. Got on the plane, went to her service, came back, immediately back to work. Aiden, I think I took, a couple of days before, we left, to go to, the Midwest. And I think I took a day or two after, because I drove that one. Patrick, entire month, I did not go back to work for an entire month. I just couldn't, and it wasn't, I don't want to say it. Let me, and I even by myself, let me walk back. Was it that I couldn't, or was it I just wasn't in the mindset? Because I found myself, especially, given, what I do for work, I find it was more of an issue of processing, what does my work look like, given, his loss, how he died. I mean, even with Aiden, with Aiden and Patrick, especially with them being back to back. Yeah, it was a month before I, went, and thankfully, I work for, my supervisor and, her supervisor or manager, which is, amazingly wonderful with, helping, guiding me, being with me and supporting me through that process. But yeah, that though was a question, wasn't it? If I revert, if I kind of want to go back to that day, however, to ask myself if I, had to do it over again. Of course, it would be like he would be gone. Would I do things differently?
Well, yeah, but even grief affects your mind and your body.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm like the opposite of my mom. And she even puts it right in here. When your mind is working incredibly hard to make sense of a loss, it is common to become forgetful, unfocused, and preoccupied.
Mm-hmm.
I have had such severe brain fog, even still, since Bobby passed away. My job, I'm creative,
Mm-hmm.
and it is still hard for me to concentrate on doing something. When Bobby passed away, I didn't go back to work for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually just getting ready to go back to work the end of June. I went to my first networking meeting that Thursday. July 4th was Monday, and that's when I broke my leg. And then I couldn't work
Mm-hmm.
for like another 6 months. And three of those months, I couldn't do anything but just sit, because I had a cast on my leg from my toe all the way to my hip,
Mm-hmm.
and then went through 2 more casts. So I couldn't work. And even still, it's hard for me to go in there and concentrate. And I don't know if it's like, I had said at one point, it was kind of like I lost my, not desire isn't the right word, but I lost something within myself or within my work with that loss being so great. And trying to work back through that, and trying different things. And actually, I was going to post it on Facebook last night, and I haven't, but I used to wear, and I wore them out. I've gone through 2 pairs of them. I have these pink steel-toed work boots.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worn my others out. And I received in the mail from Amazon yesterday my brand new pair of my pink steel toe work boots. 'Cause I have to wear work boots because if I cut glass or anything, anything heavy, it's just, that's my safety thing.
Right, right.
And so I was like, well, maybe, and I put those on yesterday afternoon. I was like, is this going to be that magic that's going to help me like move forward a little bit? And because that's really what I want to concentrate on the next 6 months is getting that business back up. I mean, it's been going, and I've been doing really pretty good, but get it back to the level that it used to be,
I look at it as
and being able to concentrate and really love what I
Gotcha.
do again.
I look at it as a combo between, is it, your motivation takes a hit, or, you lose your mojo, or you're in a groove, and then all of a sudden something happens that throws that groove off.
Right.
It makes me think about, being on the dance floor, and I see life sometimes as this dance, and we're, on the dance floor, those of us who can,
Not me.
I have my moments. However, I look at life sometimes as a dance. We're on the dance floor and we're, gliding along. And whether or not you can dance well, I think adds to, this example, because life, you don't have to dance well.
Oh, there's a
to
lot of people
navigate.
that dance really bad that are
Yeah. Well, that navigate through life.
Right.
However, whatever you're doing, in this dance called life, you trip on your shoestring, or metaphorically trip on your shoestring, or the heel of your shoe slips out from underneath you, or somehow or other you take the stumble, and it's like, okay, how do you get back up and get back in the dance? Or if I liken it to watching figure skaters, and they are, in the midst of this really beautiful routine, they're, beautiful dance, and, in the middle of, a triple axel, they land, like kind of off, and, they end up falling, and I watch them as they get back up, and they, it takes them a minute, or, anywhere from a second to a minute to get back into that groove, and I see loss as very similar, to, we're navigating through this thing called life, and then all of a sudden, here comes a curveball, we stumble, and that motivation is off. And, again, if I use myself for example, depending upon which loss it was, either A, I became, and she talks about the effect on your mind, the hypervigilance and whatnot, but, amongst other things. But I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, all right, with this loss, I found myself like diving into, my work head first, and I didn't know the word no. Like the word no was not in my, oh, hey, we need somebody to, step in and cover this group. I'll do it. Hey, we need somebody to write an article for, this, newsletter. Oh, I'll do it. Hey, I'll throw my children into this. Hey, Mom, I need you to come, babysit the kids. Okay, bring them on. Hey, can you, oh, that's right. I better go cut the grass. And, even today, I find myself, especially when I'm in conversations with my neighbor who, is also my best friend, who he chuckles at me sometimes because he says, you've got like 8 things going over here. And I don't think in my brain I ever really processed, why do I have 8 things going? And I think about this one particular day, I was cutting the grass. I had the hedge trimmers, propped up against the hedges because I'm, cutting the hedges. He said I had the hood up on my car. Yes, I was doing something on my car. The garage door was up, so I was doing something in the garage. I had the pressure washer out, doing something with the, pressure washer. I was trimming the palm tree in the front yard. And I sat back and I want to say I counted like, 8 things, oh, and then not to mention, I'm doing stuff inside the house, like, housework, and then I'm doing laundry. All right, so I just clocked off 8 things that I'm doing all at
one
once.
time.
And I had to sit back and, it goes to this, what grief sometimes does to our minds, even when, during those times where we don't recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat back and I'm like, wow, I really do have 8 things going right now. Now, some people would argue, all right, Bonnie, you know, doing housework and laundry, okay, when the clothes are in the washer, you could be doing something else. It's not like you have to sit there and watch the washer. And I was like, I get it, but at the same time, it is, well, if I've got a load of laundry in, why not go in and, as she said, just breathe. Sit down, watch something on TV, or just, all right, I think I'm going to sit here and relax until the washer load is done, throw it in the dryer, then I'm going to go back in and relax. My brain races sometimes. I can't, I'm not saying I can never sit down and relax. I can. However, on those times where I do find myself engulfed in 8 different things at once, I found myself needing to get into the practice of sitting back and processing what is going on when I, have 8 things going, and then, the frustration that comes at the end of the day. You've done 8, you've started 8 things and you've not completed one of the 8. Like you got the front lawn cut, but you didn't cut the back.
I know exactly what you're
Or
talking
you've cut the
about.
lawn, but you haven't weed eated, but you still need this, run the weed eater.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I have the same thing going on at my place, and it's like, and you get kind of caught up in this circle, and then all of a sudden then I just sit, and then it's like you said, you had all these things going on, and then it's like, okay, what am I going to finish first? Or what am I going to do next? Or how can I do this? And then for me, it just kind of sits for a few days. And it's like, I still have to finish the crown molding in the office. I got the crown molding up, but I have to do the caulking. But in the meantime, I'm trying to fix the sprinkler system. And today, I got to go to Lowe's to pick up some mulch to make the front, right in front where the office is, look nice again. And it's like, when are you've got this and you've got that.
Or I find myself, at the beginning of the weekend, I, write down, I always call it my list of 40, because I literally have 40 things on this list, to accomplish over the weekend. And again, there, some of it are, nonsensical stuff, like what I think about, what do I have to do in the week, and I list down like all of my groups that I have to do. Okay, so make sure you have the lesson plan for, each group, because each group is different, and I do something different with each one. So that attributes to this, but then I find myself oftentimes Sunday evening looking at this list of 40 and like, what have you accomplished? Or I may have like one thing ticked off. I did get groceries this week, or I did get laundry done this week. But then it's like, oh, did I really need to do laundry? No, not really, because one basket of laundry and 20 baskets of clean clothes. Not literally in baskets, mind you. It's not like I don't have anything in my closet that I have to do this washer load. However, it is the experience for each one of us is different, and, as both books said, this process is not linear.
No.
And I find oftentimes that I could, and if I just use a week, and again, just as an example, Monday, process this way. Tuesday, process something, completely different. Wednesday, it's possible that I may go back and process, or experience what I experienced on Monday. By the time I get to Friday, I may have a combo of everything that I've experienced throughout the week. But again, understanding that that's normal. It's unique. It's not linear. It does not fit into a mold.
Oh, yeah. Well, and she says trying to fit yourself into a specific stage isn't going to help you heal.
Correct.
Either.
Correct.
And you can't, you just, there's, and that's what she says too. There's no linear stages that are supposed to be followed. And yeah, I mean, you go back and forth. And that can happen for, a long, long time.
I like how she also talked about the misconceptions about grief. One of the first ones is you should get over your grief right now.
Yeah.
You know, or now, and she highlighted that grief is not time limited. And we sit back and think about it. Your loss of Bobby's been 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Your loss of your first husband has been
34 years.
okay. So and do you still think about him? 34. Yeah.
Oh, most definitely, and especially when it comes up, you know, our anniversary, September 9th. And actually, his birthday and Bobby's birthday were one day apart. Michael's is November 16th, Bobby's is November 17th. And then Michael was killed on December 3rd. And I mean, and these are just things that are just ingrained, It used to bother me when I would go get a haircut. When I first met my first husband, that's how I met him. He cut my hair.
Mm-hmm.
And after, with Bobby and I, the last, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, we both went to the same hairdresser, and we would go to get our haircuts together. And after Bobby passed away, I never went back. I couldn't, Fortunately, my niece is a hairdresser, and so now she does my hair. And it was really kind of funny, too, because the first time I went to her, and she worked at this place, I'm pretty sure it was called Head to Toe. It was down off Little Road in 54. Head to Toe was the salon that my first husband worked at in Fort Lauderdale on Sunrise Boulevard. Down on the beach. And I was like, oh man, this is just like right too weird. And my niece, she was like, Aunt Tammy, that's weird.
And
but you have those correlations, and you still have those periods of grief, sadness for the loss, or what could have been, or you have all those years. I was so fortunate that all those years in between, I had Bobby.
and she talks about those triggers, those things that pop up, that some of them are very obvious, some of them are, wait a minute, like, I didn't even think that, how that reminds me of this, things I would hear, or places that I would go, like I'm thinking this coming up weekend, some friends we're going to a comedy club, and I'm processing one of the last outings that Patrick participated in was this same comedy club with this same group of friends. And as I'm going, I'm like, wow, if only you were here. Because Patrick did stand up, a little stand up routine. I shouldn't say a little. He did a stand up routine, periodically when they had open mic nights. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do this, and you're not here to do it with me. And where, I think about, and I miss the fact that, he's not enjoying this. At the same time, it's like, okay, I get this. Or this weekend, I was at my daughter's, and Devin, his son, was going into the house, and, he did this little, dance that I think the only thing I could describe it as is a modified man twerk, for lack of a better way to put it. But it's slow motion where it's this little bop thing, and I'm looking at him, and I'm in my car. I was getting ready to come home, and my daughter's standing by the car, and I'm watching Devin go in the house, and he's doing this little bop thingy, and I looked at my daughter, and I just, I closed my eyes for a minute, and like minorly, emotional, and I said, "Your brother used to do the same thing." And my daughter, Jeannie, looked at me and she says, "There's a lot of things that he does, facial expressions, movements, things that comes out of his mouth. It's so much his dad." And I looked at him and I was like, "You ready to come home?" He's coming home this summer. Where he's coming back to our home this summer. And he was like, "Yeah, yes, I'm ready." And I'm like, "Okay." Watching how much he's grown, and he looks just like his dad. But of course, you're getting ready to go to middle school. Daddy's not here to see this. Daddy's not here to experience this. And in 3 years, you're going into high school. Daddy's not going to be here to see this. At least not physically here to see this. And it's little triggers like that I find for me are although sad on one hand, they're also a sense of comfort on the other, because I look at Patrick lives on through his oldest son, now not discounting or minimizing the fact that he has there are 2 other children, however there is that sadness that I don't know when I will see those the other 2 children. I have things pop up on my timeline, where it's like, oh my gosh, I miss, I miss, the children, and I just hope, that's, do one of these, that they are learning, about their dad.
Mm-hmm. I had an interesting thing happen to me this week, and going back to my first husband, I was watching. I'm a member of a couple private groups for picture framers, and somebody was looking for a certain type of framer in Fort Lauderdale, and that's where we used to live. And I was kind of keeping my eye on it, and this one person posted that we can help you out. Said the name of the frame shop and the street where it was and everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's where I worked there, like back in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably one of my first jobs
Mm-hmm.
in the picture framing industry. And so I, posted on there that I had, I worked there back in the early 80s. And the girl posted back, she goes, oh my gosh, she goes, I know you. She goes, you worked for my mom. She said, but your last name was different back then. She said, I remember your husband, Michael, and we weren't married at the time. She said, I remember Michael and your dog, Bridie. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she says, but your last name was different. And I was like, well, it was either Hope or Cafferty. And she goes, no, it was Hope. And I was like, oh, wow. And I was like, that's really kind of neat that somebody, and fondly remembered us from,
Right.
back then. And yeah, I was like, oh man, this Facebook thing is really kind of crazy.
It is, but I like
it was
that.
cool.
I love that it gives us an avenue or a venue to, relive memories, to, memorialize, almost like a time capsule, which, gets me, which makes me think of her second misconception, like you can't get over your grief because you're holding on to sentimental objects. And, when I think about, Patrick has 2 Facebook pages, his one Facebook page, and then he developed another page that was dedicated specifically to, his comedy, his art, of comedy, and just, it wasn't, it wasn't just comedy. Patrick was such a brilliant, brighter. Like some of the things that came out of his mouth, like, on my mug here, there's a something that he wrote that, as I read it, it was so fitting for grief. And I asked myself, did he, was it a foreshadow to what he thought we would be going through, or I want to say it was more a reflection of what he was going through. And if I can, he says, there is nothing more than, or life is nothing more than a series of moments. It's up to you to completely capture and do as much as you can with the few and far between good ones. That way, when a bad moment presents itself, you can call up your most recent good memory and stand in the knowledge and the fact that the opportunity for something good will come again. And I took that, excerpt of his, and I used it on, the little cards that they do for the funeral. And I that's become my, one set of the words that I live by, as it relates to, mourning his loss or dealing with his loss. It is that bad, event was him leaving. At the same time, I think about, whenever I feel myself, walking out of the house and looking up and saying, I haven't forgotten you. I know you're there. I think back, oh, and I remember when, this, like, I remember, like, when I go out in the backyard, it's like he's not in the backyard anymore. But yes, he is, because I think about him in the hammock, in the backyard, or changing the hammocks, or putting the hammock with the lights, or if I'm doing something around the house, or in the garage. I remember, the last time he and I cleaned the garage together, and the huge spider that I found. It's like, kill it, please, son. I think about, people suggesting that I donate his clothing. And I'm like, no, that ain't it. That's not happening.
Yeah, you have to do stuff like that when you're ready. I had mentioned before, when Michael was killed, I was probably out delivering some artwork or something around town, and my grandma had come down to stay with me. And I came back home, and all my husband's clothes were gone. She donated them. I mean, they went to a good cause, but that, there was just like a pit in my stomach. It's the whole that, like, I didn't have that. I didn't get that choice. They were just gone. When Bobby passed away, probably within a couple of weeks, I donated some of his clothes because I knew where I wanted them to go and who it was going to help. And my aunt was with me at that time, but I still have some of his shirts hanging up in the closet. I saved. He had tons of T-shirts. I have this ginormous box of T-shirts, a Rubbermaid box that eventually will be made into a couple quilts. I still have his lunch box. I put it in the bottom drawer of the dresser with his keys, but you have to be able to do it when you're ready. And you may never ever do it. And that's okay too.
No, I found, like, with Patrick's things, I deferred, and people looked at me like, why would I put this on the shoulder of a, then, not, he was, 9 when his father died, he's 11 now. Why would you put that on the shoulders of a 9-year-old, 11-year-old? And I said, no, it is not that I put it on his shoulders. It was more me giving him a voice and some say-so into, what, happened as it relates to, like I said, Pat was a single dad, Devin, his oldest, he's had custody of Devin since, Devin was an infant. And so, to look at this little boy who, the only parent, and again, I'm not, being disparaging towards his mom. I love his mother. However, Patrick was the custodial parent. Um, you know, I had to also process that this 9-year-old, then 9-year-old, was going to be grieving as well, and not minimizing or robbing him of any say so, not doing, like being mindful to, how much, like explaining to him, Daddy's gone. I hope he's not dead. I think was the first words he said to me. And, trying to maintain my own emotion, while I'm dealing with him, but then looking at this child who was more concerned about how I was feeling, who was more concerned about, his uncle, how my oldest son was feeling, as his first words was, "How's Uncle Carl?" And I thought that was such an unusual, my brain, like it took me a microsecond to process I just told you your father's gone. And you're asking about, how is your uncle? And then it dawned on me, because Uncle Carl just lost Aiden, he
Right.
was, when I said, I, need to be, he goes, no, I have to be strong for you. Daddy, Daddy told me to be strong and not show fear or something like that, or, not to be afraid. And I'm like, but it's okay to cry, I can't cry, I have to be strong for you. Wait a minute. So again, giving him say so on, what do you want me to do with Daddy's clothing? I want you to save them so I can grow into them.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you want us to do? At first he said, I want Daddy buried, but then, no, Daddy was cremated, so Daddy can come back home. So Dad's at home with us. So yeah, it's important, as we, process this and understand, that it's a journey that not only that we're on, but it's a journey that others are on with us.
Exactly. In Dr. Wolfelt's book, he had 10 Bill of Rights. Stephanie Jose has actually expanded that. And is there any one in there that stood out for you that maybe is a little bit different from what we had talked about in the past?
Let me. I think the one thing that she put in here, and I'm going to say two, where she said, I have a right to trust myself, my thoughts, and my feelings. And she put, I have the right to openly talk about my grief, even if it makes others uncomfortable. I know we're, winding down, our segment today. And, of course, we'll continue this chapter next time. But those two stood out to me because those two highlighted the importance of recognizing that grief is individual. It's individualized. It is unique to us. That, others, and like I said, next week when we talk about how others, how you handle others or others may handle you while you're going through this process, that, it's important that we and everybody else, recognize that it's an individual journey.
It is, most definitely. And if you want to go through this book with us, feel free. You can go to Amazon, smile.amazon.com, and you can buy the next show. You can have this book and be through the first chapter with us if you would like. We want to mention, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Bonnie has her new T-shirt on. So we have the first T-shirts for the foundation. The foundation logo is on the back. You can click on that or take a picture of that QR code and it'll take you to the website. We have the regular men's version. We also have a V-neck female version, and you can either pick them up if you're local, or they can be shipped to you. And we do have some at the foundation office too, if you want to call the foundation office, and we can get them to you here locally. And also, you know, as you're going through this grieving process, if you know anybody that needs our purple folder, we've had several go out in the last couple of weeks here locally to help suicide loss survivors. Just contact us, and we can even mail these out across the United States. So,
You know, as well as, you know, understanding and, you know, taking advantage of the many, you know, other resources besides, you know, the Purple Folder, or in addition, you know, to the Purple Folder. You know, we have Nomini, we have the, you know, the Suicide Foundation. You know, reach out to a mental health professional, you know, if you feel
Yeah.
the need to do
well,
so.
yeah, and that's what I wanted to say for sure. If certain symptoms that you're having are becoming severe, please, they should be addressed by a doctor or a grief counselor. And so, you know, reach out to a professional if you or anybody you know is having a more difficult time.
There's no shame in
Because,
asking for help.
You know, again, you're not alone in this journey. We're not alone in this journey. And we just always want everybody to remember there's always hope. So thank you, everyone. See you next week.